It was too nice a day to be stuck in a stuffy car, and Mr. Jackson turned off the dual carriageway and took a winding road up a wooded incline until he reached the brow of a hill. He steered the classic Morris off the tarmac and onto a grass verge. They had driven higher than Simon had imagined, and from up there the view was terrific. Through the dusty windscreen he looked down on a patchwork of farmland, small villages huddled around ancient churches across the Sussex Weald. In the far distance, the South Downs resembled a vast giant lying on his side. The majestic hills stretched along the south coast for 100 miles, acting as a buffer between the land and the sea, a landscape once inhabited by prehistoric man in hill forts and earth enclosures. "Where are we?" Simon asked. The Morris's twin doors were wide open, and he sat dangling his legs out of the back of the car while the sun bathed his face and arms in its glorious warmth. He opened a packet of salt and vinegar crisps that the detective had given him and started to munch them. Mr. Jackson leant against the side of the car, admiring the view, eating a sandwich. "We're very close to Leith Hill. You can see the old tower over to your left." On the top of a slightly larger hill, surrounded by dense woodland, was a clearing in which a stone-built Gothic tower jutted up into the sky. Simon gave it a cursory glance. His thoughts were elsewhere. "I knew there was something odd about that vicar. But he couldn't have done that murder you talked about, not 70 years ago, 'cause he wouldn't have been born." "You're right. In the normal way of things, it wouldn't have been possible. You suggested the vicar looked about 40, Mr. Jackson said, brushing crumbs off his beige suit. "Yeah, about your age," Simon replied. "Yes, that's about right." "He definitely wasn't 70. "No." Simon screwed up the empty bag of crisps. "You got your dates muddled up then." "No. The date is correct. Mrs Durand-Deacon was murdered in 1949. How did she die?" Mr. Jackson moved round so that he could join the lad on the back lip of the car. "I'm not sure I should tell you. It's a bit gory." Simon beamed. "I like gory." "Yeah, I bet you do." "Well, how did she die?" "The poor woman received a bullet in the back of the head." "Is that all? Doesn't sound very gory. People get shot all the time." The detective smiled. "Yes, that's true enough. But they don't all get put into a bath of acid afterwards and left there until their bodies have dissolved into a quantity of yellow sludge." "Is that what happened?" "That's exactly what happened." Simon pictured the scene, thinking it would make a great computer game. "Was he a bath salesman or something?" "No," laughed the detective. "It wasn't that sort of bath. He filled a large, empty oil drum with sulphuric acid and forced her body in, head first. He then locked up the workshop in Leopold Road and left her for a couple of days. When he came back, the body had fully dissolved." Simon could almost see it. Gory, but in a macabre way, kind of cool. Mr. Jackson got up to fetch something from the front of the car. He came back with the little silver gun and handed it to Simon. "This is the gun he used to shoot the old lady. It's a .38 Webley revolver." Simon's eyes widened as he held it. He was a lot more respectful this time. "Really? It's the same gun? The actual gun that killed her?" Mr. Jackson nodded. "Caw!" Simon pointed it at a tree in the distance, wishing he could fire it, just to see how it felt and how loud it was. Then he lowered the weapon and turned to the detective. "Shouldn't it be bagged up as evidence? You know, like that slipper." "A slipper?" It doesn't matter. Why have you got it? Are you going to shoot the vicar with his own gun?" "No, it's not loaded." "But what about fingerprints and stuff?" Mr. Jackson took the gun back, placing it in his pocket. "That's all right. We don't have to worry about fingerprints. The murderer has already paid for his crime. Simon knitted his brows. You mean he's done his time and been let out of prison? No, they hanged him in August 1949. Hanged him? Yes, until he was dead. But that can't be right. The man in the beige suit folded his arms. His face was quite serious. I know it sounds crazy, and I don't expect you to believe me, but the man who murdered Mrs Durand-Deacon, known as the acid bath murderer, was hanged for that murder in 1949. But I think he's come back, and may very well murder again. Join me again next time, and I'll read the next chapter of The Ghost Detective.